Hello, good evening, welcome to the latest video. Today it's 5 rock singers from the 1970s who don't get enough recognition, according to me. Bobby Harrison. Now, Bobby Harrison started life as a drummer, and he was actually in Procol Harum when they recorded A Whiter Shade of Pale, but he decided that he wanted to be a singer, and so left Procol Harum and went off to form a band called Freedom, along with a chap called Roy Royer, who also left Procol Harum at the same time. Now, I haven't got any Freedom on vinyl because they're on that Vertigo label, the Vertigo Swirl, and they cost an absolute fortune, and I've never been able to track one down that was affordable, but luckily they were all whacked out on CD by Angel Air and the like a few years ago, so we have got a copy of the music. The first album they did, I spoke about a while ago, it was actually used in a slightly iffy Italian movie called Black on White. It's totally instrumental, so Bobby Harrison doesn't get involved in it at all. But that was actually the first album that came out under the name of Freedom. They then went on to make a couple more albums called Freedom at Last, and Through the Years, and another one called Freedom, before they sort of morphed into more of a country rock band. They'd started off with sort of progressive rock type stuff, but then by the time they got to this one, it was more tinged with a hint of sort of country rock, and was a bit of a sign of what was to come next, because when Freedom folded, Bobby Harrison went on to form another band, and the band that he went on to form were these, Snafu. Now, Snafu also included Mickey Moody, who was to go on and be in Whitesnake a few years later. You can see they've got a Roger Dean cover and all sorts of stuff. There's a picture of the band on the back, if we can see that all right. Now, they made 3 albums in the 70s. This one came out in 1973. It's got a great version of Drowning in the Sea of Love on it, which is a great vehicle for Bobby Harrison's voice. Pete Solly was also on this, playing the keyboards, which is interesting because Pete Solly later went on to be a member of Procol Harum, didn't he? So, as Bobby Harrison came from Procol Harum and ended up in Snafu, Pete Solly did the other way around, and he also played on that first Whitesnake EP as well, along with Mickey Moody, who is on this album as well. They made 2 more albums after this one, Situation Normal and All Funked Up. You can get these on vinyl for not too much money. I don't think they're that expensive, but they are also now available on CD as well, and recently a box set has come out, so they're well worth tracking down. These Bobby Harrison was a great singer, and this was a great band. There's all sorts of different types of stuff in there. There's lots of slide guitar from Mickey Moody. They're a great little band, Snafu. I suppose they just got lost in all that sort of mid-70s stuff and never quite made it. I've also got another interesting little Snafu album, or should I say, a little interesting half of a Snafu album, because I've got this Pop Spectacular, the BBC, where they used to put live concerts on one side of this record is Snafu Live, so it's got about 3 or 4 tracks on it, and that's a nice little thing to have as well. After Snafu, Bobby Harrison then went on to form this band, Nobody's Business, and this album only came out in Japan, didn't come out anywhere else. It's pretty good sort of generic 80s rock. We've got into the 80s by now, and it's pretty good stuff, but very, very hard to get hold of. He had made a solo album in the meantime, but I haven't managed to get a copy of that. I've only got a copy of that digitally, so I'm still on the lookout for that. That's called Funkist, so if you see that one around anywhere, it's worth picking up, and you get a bit of an idea of what sort of a singer Bobby Harrison is. You can just see Bobby Harrison there on the Obi. After that, he teamed up with a band called Metto Forte, who I think were from Norway, and he made this album called Solid Silver, which is only available on CD. You can see from the picture at the back, he's a little bit older by then, and this is a sort of great, sort of fun album. Nothing spectacular, but it's pretty good stuff if you like that sort of thing. Bobby Harrison's got a great voice. Go and check him out if you've never heard him before. Sadly died a few years ago, but he's left some great music behind, so I would suggest, if you want to have a proper good old listen to Bobby Harrison, Snafu should be your first point of call probably followed by Freedom, and then maybe Nobody's Business, and this one after that. But Bobby Harrison, then the first one of our 70s rock singers who are underrated, and some people might not even have had a chance to listen to yet. So go and check him out, Bobby Harrison. Second up then is one that you may have heard of a little bit more, probably a little bit better known than Bobby Harrison, and that's Terry Wilson Slessor, who was most famous, of course, for being in Backstreet Crawler with Paul Kossoff, but he'd been in other bands before that, and the first album I've got to visit is this one, Beckett, which is a great album. You can see Terry Wilson Slessor in the middle there. This is produced by Roger Chapman, and he's a pretty good sort of prog psychedelic sort of album from the early 70s. Pretty good stuff. And I think there's a clip of these on the Old Grey Whistle Test available on YouTube, which is well worth tracking down and having a look at. So Terry Wilson Slessor then in Beckett. After that, he teamed up with Paul Kossoff in Backstreet Crawler. They made 2 albums. This one, The Band Plays On, and then after that one, the last album that Kossoff made, which was this one, Second Street, which also has got Rabbit Bundrick on it from 3 Days as well. They're both brilliant albums, especially this one. This one is a really, really top-class album. They're available on CD now. They've been repackaged and re-put out in the last few years. You can probably still pick the vinyl up without breaking the bank as well, and it's well worth doing that if you can. But if you can't, the CDs are well worth having as well. There's also a live album, which for some bizarre reason was actually released as a Paul Kossoff album and not as a Backstreet Crawler album. I have absolutely no idea why that was done, because it is definitely Backstreet Crawler, as you can see from the pictures on the back and the track listing and listening to it. It's not a Paul Kossoff solo album at all. It is a live Backstreet Crawler album. So anybody who comes rifling through my record collection will wonder why an album which appears as though it ought to be 400k is actually 400b. After the sad death of Paul Kossoff, they decided to continue and dropped the Backstreet bit and just became Crawler. Again, I don't know why they did that, or whether they were forced to do that, or what, or they thought they needed to distance themselves from what had gone before. The bands are very similar. Jeff Whitehorn came in to play the guitar, replacing Kossoff, and you probably couldn't get a better replacement in those days than Jeff Whitehorn, as he's got a very similar sort of style without being a copycat. So that was pretty good. So they made 2 great albums as well. This first one was called Crawler. The old snake on the front. You can see the picture on the back. And then the second one, which is probably a little bit more geared for the American market, I think, Snake, Rattle and Roll. Well, that's a pretty good album as well. Probably not quite as good as the first one, but still well worth getting hold of if you can. I've also got this interesting little album here, which is a US radio show, live in concert, Crawler. It's from, it says on the back here, for radio station, play only, demonstration not for sale, and it was recorded at my father's place. It doesn't actually give me the date, but the tracks have got on the back if anybody's interested. Without You, Babe, You Got Money, Keep On Running, You and Me, Passed On Dreamer, Sold On Down the Line, Worn Out Dream, and probably their most well-known song, Stone Cold Sober, which probably, if it had a better known band name on it, would have been quite a big hit, because it's a very, very catchy sort of track. There are also a couple of live CDs as well that came out. This one is from the tour to promote the second album, and this has got Keep On Running, Sail On, One Way Street, Where Is the Money, Muddy Water, which is obviously Muddy Waters, which is a cover of a free track, Liar, How Will You Do It, The Shape I'm In, First Class Operator, and then Stone Cold Sober. A second one, this one's got 2 concerts on it. It's called Pastime Dreamer Live. There's a bunch of radio interviews on the back of this as well. So there's plenty of stuff around with Terry Wilson Slessor off here to get a listen to. What's he like? Well, he is in a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Paul Rodgers, as you can imagine, because, well, he has a similar sort of style to Pa working with Kossoff and everything, but he's by no means a Paul Rodgers clone. He's got a lot of ability, and it's one of those strange things to me is why he didn't become massive. He did join a band called Charlie for a little bit and made an album with them, which I think had a hit on that in America. He also was a backing singer off stage for the Michael Schenker group at some point, which astounds me because I can't think of a Michael Schenker group singer who was better than Terry Wilson's Letter, so that seems a bit odd. And there's also a story that he auditioned for Iron Maiden at some point as well, and if they'd have given him the job, maybe Iron Maiden would have been a band worth listening to. These days he's still going and playing in a Kossoff tribute and doing his own solo shows and also doing some Rod Stewart gigs as well, not with Rod Stewart, but actually being Rod Stewart as a Rod Stewart tribute act. And he's also just recorded a new album, which I'll be hoping to get a listen to shortly and talk to you about that. So there you go, Terry Wilson's Letter, the second one on our list today of 70s rock singers who don't get enough credit. You might not have heard of. Check him out, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube. So there you go, Terry Wilson's Letter from Beckett, Backstreet Crawler, and just one other thing to add to that as well, he's also fronting Geordie now, the band that Brian Johnson used to be in before he joined AC/DC. So there you go, Terry Wilson's Letter, the second one on the list. Now the third one on the list is not going to come as a surprise to anybody that knows me, and it's this chap. Spoken about him many times before on this channel, Frankie Miller. Now some of you may say, is Frankie Miller a rock singer? Well, let me tell you this, Frankie Miller can sing whatever he likes and whatever he puts his mind to. He's a rock singer, he's a blues singer, he's a soul singer, he's absolutely brilliant. Why this man is not a superstar is totally beyond me. Just doesn't make any sense at all. And his career, while it was going, because sadly he had a brain aneurysm a few years ago and can't sing anymore, but he's making a decent enough recovery, which is great news, and hopefully one day we might get to hear him again. But he's gone through so many different styles on these albums, and he's also a top-notch songwriter as well, well sought after in America by a lot of those sort of country rock type people, and you'll be surprised if you look through some records and things, you'll find his name in the writing credits for quite a bit of stuff. And his last album that came out was an album full of unfinished songs, ones that he'd started but couldn't finish, and some great people came in to finish them off. I spoke about that album a few weeks ago. Joe Walsh in particular came in and played some guitar on it, but there's so many different styles on this. This is the first album, Once in a Blue Moon. Now this is, you might say, basic sort of British pub rock with a little bit of Americana country thrown in. Then you move on to the second one, which is this one, High Life, and now we've got all sort of New Orleans soul and all sorts of stuff on this one, and the unreleased mix, which you can now get on a box set, is even more New Orleans soul than this mix that came out. So totally different to the first album. Then you've got the rock, which again is a sort of British country rock blues type thing as well. There are tracks on here that have been covered by all sorts of people. UFO covered one of the tracks on this album, A Fall in Love, and lots of other people have covered that as well. Ain't Got No Money's on here, which was a bit of a minor hit, and I think Bob Seger, did that, or did he do I'm Old Enough? I can't remember. He did one of those two. Anyway, this is a great album. Then we got more sort of down a sort of honky-tonk rock sort of way with these two, Frankie Miller's Full House, and then this one, Double Trouble. Again, there's all sorts of great people playing on these, some really good songs, some good covers as well as some self-penned songs by Frankie Miller, and also Andy Fraser pops up as well. He wrote Be Good to Yourself, which was on this album, which was a bit of a mini hit, made the top 30 I think, and it's also a cover of John Lennon's Jealous Guy on here, which John Lennon said was the best version that he had ever heard, beating everybody else's by a mile. It's also worth pointing out at this time that Otis Redding's widow said that Frankie Miller had got the blackest sounding white voice she had ever heard, which has got to be something of a compliment to somebody who wants to sing that type of music. So brilliant stuff there, and continuing right through the 70s. So yeah, great albums still coming out throughout the 70s. Then when we get to the last album of the 70s, the 1979 album, well, there are two versions of that. There's the English version, or the European version, which is called Falling in Love. A picture of Frankie with his hat on, and this is the one that has got that track Darling on it, which if you've never heard of Frankie with that, you have now, because you've heard that on the radio and stuff loads of times, haven't you? It's one of those dreadful things, isn't it? The song that he's most famous for is probably one of the worst songs that he ever sang. But there you go, there's some great stuff on this as well, including a cover version of Is This Love as well. So that's pretty interesting. But in America, it was called A Perfect Fit instead. One of the tracks was changed over, and so was the running order. You can see, rather than me reading them out, you can pause it if you like. There's the two together, if you can see them, and zoom in or whatever. You can see that the one track that is different, the American album, has got a track called Something About You on it, which replaces If I Can Love Somebody off this one, which I think is a bit daft really, because If I Can Love Somebody is a pretty good track, and there are probably others that would have been a better choice to get rid of. The track Something About You, though, that is a particularly good track as well. But by this time we're getting more down the soul pop sort of route, and still brilliant though. Then he did one more album for Chrysalis, and that's this one. It's called Easy Money, and that's got The Woman in You on it. Also got a great version of Why Don't You Spend the Night, Heartbreak Radio. Great Frankie Miller track, some really good songs there. We're starting to get a little bit more rocky again now, but that was his last album for Chrysalis, which I think came out in 1980. Yes, it did, 1980. So we're into the 80s now, and then that's where things change a little bit more, because this album that came up next, Frankie Miller Standard, this is classic 80s rock. This could be a Whitesnake album. It is absolutely cracking. It's got some great, real sort of what you class as hard, heavy 80s radio friendly rock tracks. Absolutely brilliant stuff. If you're a fan of bands from the early 80s, like your Foreigners and your Journeys and even your Bon Jovis and people like that, you'll absolutely love this. This is absolutely brilliant album. Standing on the Edge, again, there's a few tracks on there co-written with Andy Fraser from Free as well, so you get a bit of an idea what you are going to get. What turned out to be his final sort of album really was this one, Dancing in the Rain. That was on Vertigo by now for this one, and this has got Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy playing the guitar. It's got Simon Kirke from Bad Company playing the drums, so you know what you're going to get here. This is another great sort of blues-based rock album with a good soulful singer on it. It could be Paul Rodgers, it could be David Coverdale, it could be anybody, but it's Frankie Miller, and it's great stuff. Again, why is Frankie Miller not in the same, thought of in the same way as all those people? He is, by other singers, he's the favourite singer of lots and lots of people. Probably most importantly, maybe Rod Stewart says he's the greatest singer ever. And there you go. That was 1982 by the time that came out. Again, all these albums, they're not that difficult to get hold of, and they've all been released on CD as well. This one's probably the hardest one of the ones to get, because it's not a part of all the CD box sets, because it's on Vertigo and not on Chrysalis like all the others. Although, having said that, Standing on the Edge isn't on Chrysalis either, so that one might be a little bit more difficult to get hold of than the others as well. Although I'm pretty sure Standing on the Edge has been given a re-release on CD at some point. I'm not 100% sure that this one has had a CD release since way back in the 90s, when CDs were sort of reasonably new, and a version of it did come out on CD back then. So what else did he do then, Frankie Miller? Where else can you find him? Well, he did lots of live stuff he was very big in Germany. There's lots of Rock Palace concerts. There's a few of those available on CD. There's this one that I've got here as well from the Standing on the Edge tour as well, which is quite rocky in places, and there's a 1976 one included in that as well. There's lots of stuff on YouTube. He also did lots of stuff with Rory Gallagher as well. Never got around to recording anything in the studio. Was also going to be in a band with Robin Trower, I think, and Jimmy Dewar was going to be the bass player in that. So he would have great backing vocals, wouldn't he, for that one. I'm pretty sure that he lived in Jimmy Dewar's flat for a bit as well. There's also talk of a band with Kossoff and Andy Fraser, which was going to be called the Rumble Down Band. That never happened. The band with Robin Trower was going to be called Jude, by the way. But it's almost one of those nearly things for Frankie Miller. He didn't quite make it into the top bracket, but he really, really should have done. And if you talk to musicians and you talk to other singers, they will all tell you Frankie Miller is top notch, one of the best singers around, and sadly not everybody seems to have given him a fair go. So if you get the opportunity, get out there, track down some Frankie Miller stuff and give it a listen, and you can then at least say I've done one good thing for you if you've watched my videos. Next up could possibly be the least known one on this list, and that is a chap by the name of Paul Williams. Not to be confused with the American singer by the name of Paul Williams. This is the British singer by the name of Paul Williams, and he was in this band, Juicy Lucy. There's a picture of him on the back of the cover. This is that great Juicy Lucy album where the cover folds out into a massive, great big thing with about 6 panels that size. I'm not going to get it out now because it'd be too big to go on the camera. It probably falls to bits as well, because this is on that original old Vertigo Swirl label, and sounds absolutely brilliant. Proper good old sort of early 70s blues with a bit of sleaze and rock and stuff in there as well. Great version of Woody the Pimp on this as well. Brilliant album. Paul Williams has got a great sort of gravelly, bluesy, rocky voice, and he can really pelt it out when he wanted to. The second album is called Get a Whiff of This, and we've gone over onto the Bronze label by now. That's a pretty good album. There's a great version of Midnight Rider on this as well. Really good album. Let's get a whiff of this, Juicy Lucy. Interesting point as well. We spoke earlier about Mickey Moody, didn't we? Working with Bobby Harrison in Snafu. Well, by the time this album came along, Mickey Moody had joined Juicy Lucy. So Bobby Harrison working with Mickey Moody and Paul Williams as well. This was actually before Snafu, because this was sort of about 1972. And then the third and, well, it's not the third, actually, it's the fourth and final Juicy Lucy album from the 70s is this one, Pieces. Now, by this time, quite a lot of the original members of the band had gone, and Mickey Moody is still there, Paul Williams is still there, and Jean Roussel has come in to play the keyboards. And you can see from the back, there's a picture of the band there. This is a great country rock album. Now, this is actually quite close to being Snafu in a way, but with Paul Williams singing instead of Bobby Harrison. So a bit of similarity there. The first album by Juicy Lucy, I haven't got a copy of that on vinyl. That's pretty hard to track down and is pretty pricey on vinyl too. I've got a copy of that on CD, but I forgot to get it out of the cupboard, which is a bit of a schoolboy error. After Juicy Lucy, Paul Williams then was in this band, Tempest, with Mark Clark, John Heisman and Alan Holdsworth. This is a great album. You can see it cost me the princely sum of £1.99. Well, you wouldn't get a copy of it for £1.99 these days with the old flip-up cover there. Look, and a bit of info with the thing. Well, we've got an inner sleeve as well. Yeah, we have got a nice inner sleeve as well. And I think this was on Bronze as well. The same label that, of course, Uriah Heep were on. Yeah, it was. They always made a good job, didn't they, of their packaging and stuff. So that was Tempest. Far more sort of prog rock, as you can imagine, with the other people involved than Juicy Lucy were. Later on, there was an attempt to sort of reform Juicy Lucy, if you like, but it didn't quite pan out the way it should have, because there was another band called Juicy Lucy going at the same time by the guitar player who had been in the original lineup, and there was a bit of a hoo-ha about who was going to be called Juicy Lucy, and both of them released albums at exactly the same time. So this one actually ended up being packaged as Juicy Lucy, featuring, and then a list of all the people down there, and it really became known as Blue Thunder. But this has got some great people. It's a really, really good album. If you can grab hold of a copy of this, it was on Outer Music. Mickey Moody's on this as well. Pete Stroud's on it as well. There's lots of good people playing on this. Andy Summers and Mick Taylor are also on there as special guests. You can see there's a few little pictures in there of that, but if you can find a copy of this is a really good album, well worth getting if you like your blues, rock and all that type of stuff. And then a little bit later again he did another album with Mickey Moody called Smokes, what's it called? It's called Smokestacks, Broom Dusters and Hoochie Coochie Men. A title and a half, isn't it? Now you can see a picture on the front there of Mickey Moody and Paul Williams in the foreground with some old bluesters in the back as well. So pretty good stuff there. Some good tracks on that. So there you go. There's a picture of Mickey Moody and Paul Williams on the front. Some great old blues tracks on this, and then well worth tracking down if you can get a copy of this. Sadly, Paul Williams died, I think, 2019. But again, like Bobby Harrison earlier, has left a chunk of great music behind, and it's well worth tracking down. Somebody you might not necessarily be aware of, but you can find some stuff on YouTube, especially the Juicy Lucy stuff will be fairly easy to get a hold of, and I dare say you can probably pick these CDs up probably without too much difficulty. There you go, Paul Williams. Now the fifth and final one then is in the top right hand corner of the thumbnail, and anybody who knows me again has probably guessed who this is if they didn't recognise him from that picture. It is, of course, Jess Roden, who is probably the most underrated one of the lot on here, because he never really had any sort of big hits at all. Sort of started off in the Alan Bown set, and they had a great album in the 60s, Outward Bound, and some great tracks. They had a brilliant version of All Along the Watchtower. Really good late 60s psychedelic pop type stuff. Really, really good stuff. That I think it's probably quite difficult to get hold of on vinyl, but it's available, as you can see, on CD, and that's where I've got it. And then went on to form this band, Bronco, and they were signed to the Island label, so this is on that nice Island pink label from 1970. They did two albums, this one which is called Country Home, and another one called Aches of Sunlight. Sadly not got that one on vinyl, but the two of them are available on this CD box you can get hold of. Really good stuff. Again, Robbie Blunt playing the guitar on this, who of course went on to be in Robert Plant's solo band in the mid-80s on Big Log and all that sort of stuff. And this is pretty much your sort of country folk rock type stuff by this time. After that, Jess Roden went on to be in a band called the Butts Band. Is with a couple of members of the Doors when they needed to get a new thing together after Jim Morrison had gone. It was Jess Roden they chose, and this is a cracking album. Really is good stuff, this. And go back and look at the video that I made a few months ago about this album if you want to hear about it, rather than we're making this one too long. But it's absolutely brilliant. And of course then, one of the things that a lot of people don't know about Jess Roden is that he was considered as the replacement for Ian Gillan in Deep Purple, probably on the back of his sort of decent rock singing on this, rather than his sort of countrified stuff on the Bronco stuff, or his psychedelic pop stuff on the Alan Bown. But he was definitely considered by one or two people. John Lord said they don't think they got as far as getting him down for a trial, but I'm not sure that Jess Roden probably would have wanted to be in a whopping great big band like Deep Purple. After he went solo after this, and then sort of disappeared from the music scene for a while, and then made a very low-key comeback at a place not far away from where I live, and they sort of advertised the comeback gig in their sort of like monthly magazine. This was in the days before the internet, of course, and I remember looking at it and almost dropping the cup of coffee I was drinking at the time. Jess Roden's doing a gig, get on the phone and book some tickets sharpish. And we got there for it, and that place was absolutely heaving. They couldn't let everybody in because there were so many people trying to get in who hadn't got tickets and all that sort of stuff. And Jess Roden came out and he just looked totally and utterly bewildered at the amount of people that were there. And I think he said something along the lines of, I didn't know whether anybody would come. But that again tells you what sort of a singer Jess Roden is, the singer's singer. Everybody who is a decent singer as heard of Jess Roden will tell you he is absolutely brilliant. After the Box Band he went solo, then there's the first solo, he's on Island by Now, and then you've got this one as well, Play Dirty, Play Class, which is pretty good. And after that you got Keep Your Hat On, a track that was totally ruined of course, wasn't it, by that film and Tom Jones and all them people, but the version on here is absolutely brilliant. There's a great version of Mama Roo on this as well. And then you've got the more folkier, laid back sort of album here as well a few years later. There's also a great live album called Blowing as well, and there's also a live CD on the BBC. Now, I spoke earlier about when Jess Roden made his comeback. Well, he called himself Jess Roden and the Humours in, and they made an absolutely brilliant CD. Again, didn't get it out of the cupboard, and all the cameras and stuff are in the way now, so if I try and get it out, everything all falls to bits. So I'll maybe stick a little picture of it up. That's probably quite difficult to get hold of because I think it was only sold at gigs. And they also put out a live album as well, which was recorded at the place I was talking about earlier, which was the Robin Hood Club. That's when it was in Brierley Hill rather than where it is now. It's moved now, so it got knocked down, but it was in Brierley Hill when Jess Roden was playing there. Also, a great place to go because Trapeze, who I've spoken about many times, they did a comeback gig there as well, and Jess Roden did 2 or 3 comeback gigs in the end there because he came back a year or 2 later as well to end up recording a live album. And the first track is missing on that, and the reason the first track is missing is because a mate of mine fell off a chair and made so much noise they couldn't use the track on the album. Can't end this piece without showing you this. This is Jess Roden, The Hidden Masters, the Jess Roden Anthology. Now, this, it's impossible to get hold of this. It's a very, very, very limited when it came out, and I was lucky enough to be involved with some people who were involved with a chap who was putting this together, and we managed to get your order in before it was even out, really, before it was even in print, because there was going to be so few copies. And at that time you could pay an extra amount and have your name in the credits and all that sort of stuff. I actually couldn't do that because at the time I was relocated and every single penny had to be accounted for, and I couldn't justify it. Sometimes sort of wish that I'd have been able to, but doesn't matter because I've got this instead. And it also came with a nice little note from the man who put it together, Neil Story. There you go. Hope you enjoyed Martin, and a little thing there, and it's number 179 and 950. If you ever see one of these for sale anywhere and you can afford it, buy it, because it'll be an investment rather than, if you don't like it, which would be crazy, I can't imagine anybody not liking it, but there are people who would pay good money to get a copy of this. It's got all sorts of stuff on it, and the thing that is the most interesting about this is it's all different. Although it's called Jess Roden the Anthology, it isn't just lifting tracks off the albums, it's alternate versions or things that didn't get used. On the first disc you've got the Alan Bown set, you've got stuff from the Alan Bown, then you've got Bronco, then you've got loads of Jess Roden songs that are maybe different versions or didn't make it to the album. You've got a couple of Butts Band things on there. You've got the Paul Kossoff track on Ready. Well, Paul Kossoff did his only solo album. Only 2 people got to sing on it. One was Paul Rodgers, the other one was Jess Roden. That shows you just about how good he was. Then you've got all the Jess Roden band stuff. There's some stuff with Billy Livesey. Then you've got the Rivets, which is another one which I sort of missed out earlier. Sorry, I forgot about that one. That's a little bit different to his normal stuff, as is the 7 Windows. And then you've got some Jess Roden and the Humans from later on. But it's a lovely package, this. You can see it's got all sorts of, squash me little note, it's got the discs in the thing, and then there's all sorts of writing and stuff in there. It's brilliant. I mean, it's a bit mean of me to be showing it really, because you'll never get hold of one. But if you do, it'll cost you a pretty penny, but it'll be worth every penny if you are a Jess Roden fan. And if you're not, you should be. Get yourself on to YouTube and listen to some stuff. The CDs, I think, are readily sort of available now. The vinyl, to be fair, his solo albums, they're not difficult to pick up on Discogs and things. They're not dear. You can pick them up for probably less than a tenner. There's a CD best of around as well. This, of course, would be the holy grail for a Jess Roden collector. But there you go. That's my 5 underrated rock singers from the 70s. I could have made a list of 10 now with the 5 that came to mind first, and I will tell you now that I'm planning to do a video of my favourite vocalists of all time, and at least 2 of these in this will figure on that list. So see if you can figure out which 2 they might be. If you can think of any other people from the 70s who you think are underrated and don't get enough credit, then let me know in the comments below, and I'll let you know if I've got some stuff in there. Like I say, I could have made this list a lot longer. There's plenty who I have left out, so it'll be interesting to see if anybody comes up with some of those. I won't mention them now to take the fun away. Let's see what everybody else comes up with, and let me know whether you know of any of these singers, whether you've enjoyed listening to them over the years, and which ones you particularly like. They've all got a bit of a soul-y, funky, bluesy bit to their rock things. They're not straight up heavy rock singers. They've all got a little bit of light and shade in their voice, and they're all, to me anyway, a little bit special, and I hope you will get some enjoyment out of discovering them yourselves. And thank you very much for watching. This has probably ended up being far too long, as it usually does once I get waffling, but I'll see if I can cut out quite a bit of the rubbish when I get to the editing part. And until then, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.